Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About Shh. This podcast, of course, is aimed to help you navigate your relationships, maximize your pleasure, and get the most out of your sex life. Every week, we cover different topics related to the full spectrum of sexuality, romance, consent, love, the works. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Tila. I'm a sex educator, relationship expert, and published author. I love doing this podcast because I love talking about sex, sexuality. I love helping people connect with and understand their own sexuality and helping people learn how to foster healthier and more fulfilling relationships. There's so much information out there that people don't often know where to turn, and too often they're embarrassed to ask. There is no such thing as a bad question. There's no such thing as an embarrassing question. All questions are good questions, because if we don't ask questions, how ever do we learn? We don't. So if you are struggling with an area around sexuality, relationships, and have a question that you'd like answered, please send in your questions to questions@exploresextalk.com. Also, feel free to check out my website, exploresextalk.com. I have a whole section called Sex Talk, which has a number of blog posts and covers a wide variety of topics, and new stuff is getting added all the time. So let's get started on our topic for this week. So what are we talking about? Well, this week we are going to talk about the magical and wonderful world of lube. Some people might ask if it's normal to use lube, or if it's a bad sign if somebody needs to use lube. And the answer is that it's perfectly normal to use lube, and whether or not it's a bad sign really depends on the context of the situation. There are a large number of reasons why people may not produce as much of their own natural lubricant. A lot of people will immediately worry it's because the person isn't stimulated enough, or their head's somewhere else, and in some cases this may be true. It's also equally true that every body is different. The amount of natural lubricant each person produces is going to vary, and it can be affected by things like genetics, age, hormones, stress levels, medications they're taking, and so on. This doesn't mean that there's anything bad or taboo or awful about using lubes. They can actually be a really fantastic addition to your sexy time, whether you're by yourself or not. You may also want to consider using lubes for activities like anal sex, since the anal canal doesn't really produce any fluids that is going to help with penetration, and can also tend to offer more resistance. So lube can be a big help when it comes to anal sex. Now, there's a number of different types and brands on the market. Most lubes fall into one of four categories: water, oil, silicone, or hybrid. So let's cover each one a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about their benefits and drawbacks. So let's start with water. One of the best things about water-based lubes is that they are super safe to use with barriers such as condoms or dental dams. They won't cause the latex to begin to break down. They won't cause weak spots. You can enjoy some sexy time while ensuring that your birth control and STI prevention are perfectly intact. Water-based lubes are also safe to use with a majority of sex toys. Good quality sex toys, as we've sort of talked about in past episodes, can be quite pricey. So you definitely want to make sure that you're not ruining your perfectly nice new toy, or even ruining your favorite toy. Always make sure to check the box or the instructions included with your toy. There'll often be a guide to what lubricants are recommended or safe to use. If that isn't the case, I would go err on the side of caution and use a water-based lube, because it's not likely to hurt your toy. One of the major benefits of water-based lubes is that they are super easy to clean up. Since it's water-based, cleanup usually doesn't require much more than some warm water, maybe a little bit of soap. You also don't have to worry about stains, because water-based lubes will eventually just evaporate. So they're the easiest to clean up. Now, this sounded pretty good for water-based lubes, right? I mean, what cons could there be? Well, there are a few, I'm sorry to say. Nothing is perfect. And one of the largest issues people have with this kind of lube is that it tends to evaporate too fast. So it needs to be reapplied more frequently depending on how long the activities are going on for. And some people find that stopping to reapply lube at the wrong moment can really spoil the flow of activities. You can reduce the sort of potential awkwardness by placing the bottle at a convenient and easy to reach location. And it can also help if the lube has a container that makes dispensing it easier, like a pump or something. So moving on to oil-based lubes, which are another option that we have. And one of the best things about them is that you only need a small amount, and it tends to last for quite a long time. So you don't have that problem of having to reapply it often. A bottle of oil-based lube, because you don't need a lot, tends to last for quite a while. So why they can be a little bit pricier just because they will take longer to go through. They tend to make everything feel very silky and smooth. Another great thing is that they tend to work well in water, as when water hits the oiled area, it tends to bead up and roll off. So it doesn't easily wash away or dry up as quickly, which can help you maintain the right level of lubrication for your pleasure. Oil-based lubes tend to have a thicker consistency as well, which some people find a little bit more pleasing. That also makes them pretty effective for foreplay, things like massages or anything where your hands are being used. They're really also very good at stimulating non-genital erogenous areas such as the nipples. One of the most important and crucial things to know about oil-based lube is that they cannot, and I'll say this again, absolutely cannot be used with anything latex. So this means latex gloves, dental dams, condoms, toys. The oils in the lube is going to eat away at that latex and just break it down. This means it'll cause condoms to break during intercourse and will absolutely destroy any latex toys. So be aware. The other thing to really know about oil-based lubes is that they can cause stains that can be very difficult to get out because it doesn't just evaporate like the water. There's usually a residue left behind. So if it gets on, a blanket or your bedspread and it's lighter colored, chances are it's going to stain. If you're using them, it's probably a good idea to put down a towel or a blanket that you don't care if it happens to get stained. If you plan on using oil-based lubes, you must also take extra care about personal hygiene. Oil tends to clog up our pores, so this can cause all kinds of irritation, as well as preventing clean air from getting to sensitive skin on the genitals. The vagina can be particularly prone to infection-causing bacteria that can build up on oil-based lubes left behind after play that aren't properly cleaned. So make sure to clean really well with soap and water after using oil-based lubes. If you plan on using any oil-based lubes for any kind of anal play, that cleanup is even more important because the anal tissue is already exposed to a lot of bacteria, and oil-based lubes can leave a really thin film that can collect infection-causing bacteria. So if this area is not properly cleaned, bad bacteria, it will be given literally the perfect environment to thrive into an infection. So proper care and cleaning, super important to prevent that from happening. Our third lube option is silicone lubes. And they carry a lot of the benefits of oil-based. They tend to last longer. They have that super smooth and silky feel on the skin because they tend to be a bit thicker than water-based lubes as well. They also aren't as easily washed away by water, which can make them really great for, play in the shower or any other types of water play. The drawbacks to silicone lube are also similar to oil-based in that cleanup can be much more extensive and require more care. It's also super important to note that silicone lubes cannot be used with silicone toys. It will pretty much destroy your toy. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have wood floors, particularly hardwood, you have to be extra careful not to spill any on the floor. It will stain your wood floor and it's going to leave the floor slippery for months afterwards, despite your best cleaning efforts. So really be careful, to make sure that that doesn't happen. Don't want people slipping and sliding across your wood floors. That wouldn't be so great. Our last option are hybrid lubes. These are any combination of the types we've already discussed. However, some of the most common and popular hybrid lubes are a combination of water and silicone. These tend to be longer lasting than water and are safe to be used with silicone toys. It's a bit harder to talk about the benefits and drawbacks of hybrid lubes, mostly because it's going to vary from brand to brand. So, depending on what type of lubes they're mixing and what the proportions are, it's going to change how that lube is going to react in terms of how long it lasts, does it stain, can you use it with certain types of materials? All of that will be on the box, so it's really important to read the box. And I mean, reading the box is actually pretty important regardless of what type of lube you end up choosing. Some lubes actually do contain chemicals or are high in sugar, and these can cause infections. And one of the first questions that come to mind when I say that is like, well, if that's the case, why do they put stuff like that in there? And it's actually because these things can cause different sensations, and they're actually meant for different purposes. For example, lubes that are higher in sugar tend to be lubes that are actually meant for oral sex. So they have a flavor or they're maybe just a little bit more palatable to the tongue. I don't know if you've ever accidentally tasted a lube not meant for oral sex, but they taste bloody terrible. Most of them, they're not meant to be eaten. However, lubes for oral sex, they have that added sugar. They taste better. They're meant to taste better, but they're not meant to be used for anal or vaginal sex. Other lubes may add chemicals like glycerols, and these can create a tingling or warming sensation. This can actually be pretty pleasant, but when it's used during sex, it can actually upset the pH balance of the vagina or even have a negative effect on the vagina or anus because they end up dehydrating the tissue in that area, which can lead it more prone to tearing, more susceptible to STI transfer. It's generally not good. It can be painful sometimes. Warming and tingling lubes can be fantastic for nipples or sensual massages or other types of foreplay, but they're not necessarily meant for penetrative sex. So just be sure to check the label. Pick a lube that's right for the type of activities you're planning on using it for. Remember, not all lubes are going to be appropriate for all types of play. The other reason to check the label is that you want to look at the pH balance of the lube. So if you're looking for something for vaginal or anal sex, pH balance makes a difference. For vaginal sex, you want to pick something that's going to be closer to the natural pH balance of the average vagina, which tends to be somewhere between 3.8 and 4.5. If you're choosing a lube for anal sex, you want something more with a pH balance between 5.5 to 7. I know these are kind of weird numbers and you're like, I don't know what pH balance is. Doesn't matter if you know. It just know that choosing a pH balance that matches the area that you're going to be using just makes it more comfortable and more pleasant and less likely to cause an infection. So once you've picked out your lube, there is no right or wrong way to use it. You should really just use as much as you feel you need, and that's going to vary from day to day, from time to time, depending on all variety of factors. A good tip, though, is to warm it up in your hands first before applying. This isn't really necessary, but most people find it a bit more pleasing unless you enjoy that cold sensation on your nether regions. So that's all we're going to cover today. Thanks so much, everybody who tuned in for this episode and stuck it out to the end. I hope you guys have a better understanding of lube now and are eager to run out and try some if you've never tried some before. Don't forget to send in any questions you may have to questions@exploresextalk.com. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, of course, hit that subscribe button, like it, share it, recommend it to someone else. I look forward to seeing you all again next week for another fantastic episode. And as always,